He is actually for us. Do you ever think about that when it comes to God? Sometimes we think of it differently than that. Now, some people will say, oh, he's for me, whatever I want to do, but it's a little different than that. It's like a parent who loves you, because some parents, a parent who loves you wants what's best for you. They're rooting for you. Jesus is proud when he sees you doing something that makes a difference. God looks over your shoulder. So turn with me now to the book of Mark. Realize this is Peter's gospel. You know that? Some people have said, oh, Peter, it would have been nice to have, he does have a gospel. It's Mark. Mark was a young man. In fact, in the book of Mark, I think it's chapter number 13, where we're going to go to Mark chapter 12 right now. He's got long chapters in here. Chapter 13, I believe, Mark was referred to at the time when Jesus was arrested. There was a young man, it says, when Jesus was arrested, a young man who all he had on was a tunic, and the soldiers grabbed him by the tunic, and he ran out of it, and so he ran off without any clothes on. Now, that could mean he could be in his underwear, and that young man ran away. I don't know if you've ever read that. That most likely is Mark in reference to himself. Because why would you mention that, right? But he doesn't give the name, because who wants to, right? When that happens. But this is a young man. And Peter was giving the story of Jesus. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, right? Testimony. He's giving this testimony. And I want you to move through this long chapter of Mark chapter 12 to, I'll start with verse 38 because it kind of is pertinent to this. Just above verse 38, large crowd listened to him with delight. Verse 38, as he taught, Jesus said, watch out for what? Teachers of the law. They like to walk around with a nice tie and a coat. Did he say that? But actually, today that's how it would be. They like to walk around with flowing robes, being greeted with respect in the marketplace. You know that. He doesn't say it's wrong to be respected. He says they like to be, right? And you know how that is. Have you ever had a time where you started earning respect? When you're younger, you don't get as much respect, The old days, I don't know, the old timers, the Rodney Dangerfield, ever heard of him? Hey, I don't get no respect, Even my wife gives me no respect. All this kind of thing. I remember as a kid hearing it. My dad loved listening to Rodney Dangerfield. And he had like his eyes flying a little bit, And we start getting respect and we kind of, it's like a drug to us. We like it. Then we start, as we get treated earlier, it's like, hey, I'm not a kid anymore. Why are you treating me like that? I mean, we don't say that. But we feel it. And we act accordingly. They like to walk around in their flowing robes. By the way, I'd love to have a flowing robe. I hate ties. I wouldn't mind being a Jedi. I got a Jedi robes. I should come to church in that, but never mind. Flowing robes that be greeted with respect in the marketplaces. Verse 39. And have the most important what? Seats in the church. Synagogue. Most important seats. You'll notice here, we don't have those. Back in the old days, and some churches are still like this, Adventist churches, where you have the elders sitting up there. And whenever I preach in a church like that, they get to see my bald spot and my backside. So I'm glad they're on that side, right? But you know, that's how it is in the traditional. You sit up there, and I remember my grandfather, who was in the General Conference, he could sleep on a dime. Boom. And I remember as the grandkids, we would kind of laugh because we would watch him. He's sitting there and someone else is preaching, and he'd have his Bible open on his lap like this, and then he'd fall asleep. He had this whole thing worked out. If I'm looking down at my Bible, no one will notice I'm sleeping. The only problem is he started this. And then when he wakes up, he'd go, amen. Change the page. And then he'd start falling asleep again. And so the grandkids, all of us, over in Virginia, we'd look at him and say, there he is. And then I would get the little, stop talking in church. You know, that's how it is. Welcome to church. We all like to be in the most important places. But some of us don't want to be in those most important places. But he's talking about the people who are putting on a show of Christianity. Are you with it? There's a difference between the heart and what you believe and the show. And believe you me, I as a pastor have to be careful with the show. Sometimes as church leaders, we will look at the person with the show and think that that means it's real. Then you meet for real, you find out it's not real. But then again, there's other people that everyone looks down on. Who is that guy? Who is that guy that's here? Here, let me, Mom, I didn't know I was going to talk about Dad for a second on this, but here we go. I was in high school. We were at doing a camp meeting at Garden State Academy. And when I was in high school going to the senior year, I had a great leather jacket with a chain. I loved Def Leppard, therefore my jeans had rips. You remember those days? And my hair, I couldn't really grab it yet. At college, I could grab it, but I couldn't really grab it yet because Mr. Mahdi, the principal, always would look at me, "Sir, you must cut your hair." And I looked down at him and said, they lost all the scissors. Right? So I'm coming in with someone I was dating at the time. And I walk into the youth tent, and Dad was in charge of the youth tent. And a young pastor standing next to him looked out at me, and I found this out later from Dad. This guy says, "Look at this Hell's Angel guy here. Our church has really gone to the pot." And Dad, if you know my dad, he's like a little absent-minded how he operates. He's like this. He'd look up, he'd be like, says nothing. And then I come by and I go, "Hey, Dad, how you doing?" And I do that little thing because Dad was big here. And I was in high school, so I did the little rub on the belly and I moved in. He was my Buddha, right? That's how it works, right? And the guy, Dad told me later, the guy looked at him. He looked white. Dad, inside he's laughing, right? He looks, and Dad was in charge of the tent. He was one of the big dudes at the conference, right? And he looks at him and says, "Is that your son?" He goes, "Yep." Now, if you know my dad, he had suspenders. He'd do the thing. He goes, "Yep, that's my boy." He goes, and he walks in. And I can imagine him saying that, proud as all get out. Proud that his Hell's Angel looking guy was there at the youth tent. Sometimes we judge people and we see them and we immediately jump to our own things, but we don't use discernment in our lives. And Jesus says, careful how we judge each other. Be very careful. They like to have the most important seats in the synagogues and the places. They want to be the honor table at the banquet, right? They devour widows' houses, meaning their business practices show who they really are. And they show and make long, lengthy prayers. You've never been through that. I hope my prayers aren't too lengthy, guys. I've been through prayers as a young person. I used to chew the bench because it was so long, and Mom would say, "Stop it." That was at New York. Stop. We have to pray. So, yeah, they make lengthy prayers. These men will be punished most severely, Jesus says, for being fake. Then Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were being put and watched the crowd putting their monies into the temple treasury. Oh, here we go. So the temple was much like the way we do it today here at this church. We have a thing in the back. We don't do a collection like in the old days of the temple. No one would go walking around with a bucket or something, say, here, could you give me something? What you do is you put it in at the entrance, exit, or certain places, and people can put money in as an offering to upkeep the walls, the floors, everything, so that there might be success of ministry, because when you give, you're giving to God. So he's watching quietly. Many rich people threw in large amounts. Now, I want to make sure you understand as I speak today that this is not putting down rich people. This is going to be a statement of reality. I, as a pastor, have received many large checks for things, and I have thanked profusely for those. One individual actually gave $15,000 just in the last few weeks for these benches, and I thank them profusely. But here's the real question. When someone comes and mops the floor, they don't have the big money, but they help. How profusely do I thank them? Do you understand what I'm saying? We need to understand that we give out of what we have. Some people have more money. Some people have less money, but maybe more energy. Some people have more youth. Some people have, we all have the things we have. This is how life is. When you're young, you have energy. You have your commodity isn't necessarily money, unless you come from a place of wealth, which sometimes that can be good, sometimes that can be negative, okay, on the person. But when you're young, you come from a place of energy, and you have an ability to do something. Maybe not the money. Then you get a little older, and you start finally getting in where you can kind of have some money. You start having children in your life. And you don't have much money when you have kids, right? Because you're trying to make sure they're okay. And then it starts to happen. As your energy decreases, maybe the money goes up. That's how life kind of is. Now, there's some, when you get older, some get older and they still don't have money. And that's harder because, you're not no money and not the energy. So I can't work on something. That's hard for someone. But there's always something that we have that God can use. And let's read this, because I want you to understand that the work for God, number one, I want you to know that when you give to God, it needs to be not for people to see, but for God. It's to Him you give. Not to Pastor John, not to Living Stones, not to Sunland Thanga. Even though, yes, we are giving, but it's to God, who is the God of these churches and has a mission for these churches. So they came in throwing large amounts, but then a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins. These copper coins are the mite. Teeny, it's very small. Copper's always, it has a worth. Actually, copper's worth more today than it was back then. The prices have gone up as China kind of cornered the market on copper for a while there. Now it's coming back around. But the prices have been rising. And, you know, any of you that do plumbing know prices have gone up, okay, on copper. But be very careful with plastic, guys. Stick with copper. Anyway, never mind. But 2 little copper coins aren't much. I can imagine. As a child, I remember I heard this story for the first time. Really heard it for the first time. I think it was in 3rd grade, and I think it was one of my teachers. I don't remember, Lambeth or something, Lee something, I don't know. Mr. Lee, I don't know. One of the guys that was, I remember his face, but the name, I don't remember. And so he was telling the story, and he says, you know, they come with money, and they have like trumpets, blow the horn, whoop, whoop, we're giving, woo, you know, that kind of thing. And you know how it is. We all like to have the I donated, you know. We all like, and by the way, when we got rid of our debt, we had that in the giving church, and you're going to see another one as we enter a cornerstone project in December. You know, you're going to see that thing, and we're going to put little names up there, and that's wonderful. It's needed so that people can see that people care. At the same time, we sometimes forget those that make things happen too. I'm not saying those with money don't make things happen. I'm saying money is good, but money can go away very quickly. When the money's gone, who is there to be there? Because in the kingdom of heaven, actually, you ever heard, what are the streets made out of in heaven? Gold. That means you're going to be walking on what? If you're walking on something, how important is it? I mean, our parking lot's kind of messy. You can actually pick a piece out of the parking lot. Have you ever noticed that? I've actually done that. Go, oh, let me see if I can put some goo on it to keep it there. If I pull a piece out of the parking lot and I go to 7-Eleven and I ask them for a cup of coffee and I hand them that, what will the guy say to me? What is this? What is this? Please, sir, leave. I'm sure you have money somewhere or your phone or something. Money in heaven is not the gold. Money in heaven are the people that Jesus died for walking on the gold. Does that make sense? God's economic system is not based upon land. He can make anything. It's not based upon the concrete under your feet. It's based upon people. That is real wealth. People. And by the way, you know this because as you get older, you start realizing, you know, I need people around me. I can have all this money, but if I don't have community around me, if I can't deal with people, it's kind of hard, you know? That's how it is. That's why in the ancient world, people would have many children. Why? Well, the infant death mortality was big back then. So maybe 50% of your children that you give birth to would actually survive to be an adult. That's in the ancient world. But also, it's because the more children you have, the more rich you are. Because not that they give you money, but that they're your children that can be with you. You're not alone, right? And that's just a reality. So the more there is, that's just how it has been always in life. So worth is very different to us, the way we think in our economic system, than how God thinks. And he sees this woman with 2 small copper coins giving. And I can imagine those who are judging by all the gold As my teacher said in 3rd grade, all the gold gets poured in. Oh, wonderful, thousands of dollars. That's wonderful. Never mind. The guy gave $10,000, but he's a trillionaire. So 10,000 is like what? And we judge by human standards. But God goes by the heart. Have you given before and it hurt? That's the thing. And I'm not saying to do that just because you want to do that, but God gave, Jesus gave, and it hurt, right? And so that's what giving is. Giving is giving something that the other person could never pay you back for. This woman puts these 2 copper coins quietly into the plate, into the box in the back, the loving box, so to say. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow," a woman who was basically on her own, "has put more into the treasury than all of the," what? "Others. They gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in how much? Everything. All she had." That's not really a smart decision financially, is it? Here's the interesting thing. It's seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be what? Added unto you. That's living by words that are said from Jesus. It's, the skinny of this story is we cannot judge by outward appearances. I have been in many churches. I think this is like the 14th or 15th church I've been in as a pastor. This one's, a good time, and I'm going to be here a while longer, and I look forward to that. I like not constantly moving. But there was a time where I had to move from one to the next. My conference officials always wanted me to go to this place, that place, the other place, Timbuktu, the other side, whatever. And I'm good with that, but I'm really good sticking. But in that time, I have seen that there are many with cash on hand that oftentimes don't give the cash on hand. And I've also seen people that have got no cash on hand, and yet every time I pick up the phone, they're available to help where nobody else does. Never measure anything based on a checkbook or on appearances or what the outside looks like. Instead, look at the heart. The only way God's church moves forward is by many people being willing to give what they can. And I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about energy, willingness. If all money goes down, but there are people willing to work, we're okay. It reminds me of the old story, It's a Wonderful Life, with George Bailey. I don't know, this is an old one. This old movie, excellent film. Real one on real wisdom. Where his savings and loan goes down in the Great Depression. And everybody wants their money out of the savings and loan, but he got no money because nobody's paying back because nobody has money. And somehow, through a circumstance, money was lost through an uncle that made a mistake. And all the people are calling on the money. They want to have their money back, but it's all invested in houses. And if the bank goes down, then all the houses go down. And nobody has a house. So he feels like he wants to commit suicide because he's in such a terrible situation. He doesn't realize that if he wasn't there, it would have been worse. He discovers that through the story. But in the end, he comes back and he finds out that everybody decided together to help the savings and loan. Together. They came up with resources to make sure the place could be afloat, which he thought would never happen. It's people that make things happen, not money. Good people who love Jesus and are willing to work. That is real wealth. Wealth that cannot be taken away. And even if one dies, there is such a thing called resurrection. That is real wealth. Wealth that is eternal, embedded in the person of Jesus Christ. In fact, one last verse. I know potluck's calling. I know. Sorry. Potluck is calling. My microphone told me it's calling. Let me read here. Acts chapter 3. Are you ready? I love this. My grandfather used to use this term all the time. He always quoted Acts when someone asked for money. All right. Acts chapter 3, I'm going to start with verse 5. So a man, this was a beggar at the temple. I'll read it from the beginning. One day, Peter and John were going to the temple at the time of prayer. This was after Jesus had risen from the tomb and went back to heaven. 3 p.m. Now a man was there who was lame from birth. He couldn't walk. But being carried to the temple gate, called the Beautiful Gate, where they put him every day to beg for money, those going to the temple. Verse 4, Peter looked straight at him, as did John, and Peter said, "Look at us." So the man gave his attention, expecting to get something from them. You know what he's asking for, right? Any beggar does that. Someone needs something. We have that in today's culture. Then Peter says to them, "Silver and gold I do not have." Grandpa would say that. "Silver and gold have I none, but what I have I am willing to give thee." What happens is the man is healed by the power of Jesus Christ. Who needs money if you can't walk? What you need is to be able to walk. My friends, I know you're looking for healing. Different types. But you know what? The only way to that is the very one that this poor widow was giving to God. Because he holds your future. Never judge on the outside. For God looks at the heart.